Mr. Steve Pidgeon. He's a doctor. He has 2 doctoral degrees, and I have just spent the entire day with him talking about Sefer, and please check on Israeli News Live. We have a very special segment there about Sefer. But we have been talking politics as well, and he has some incredible insight into Obama. And as you know, Mr. Trump, when he was doing his campaign for president, at first he was saying that Obama does not have a valid birth certificate, and that was kind of like a problem. But then later on, Mr. Trump comes out and he tells people, oh, Obama does have birth certificate and he was born in the United States. Well, I thought, well, maybe Mr. Trump is just kind of flip-flopping. But you told me something that I was amazed. You told me that he was actually born in New York. So he is born in America. Is that true?
That's true.
And I know that he has a lot of knowledge. He did very deep research into Obama, and he even has lawsuits. And you wrote a book about him.
Yes, I published a book called The Obama Error.
Yeah, tell us everything you know.
Well, this began really in the summer of 2008. Frankly, I couldn't believe that this fellow was advancing towards the presidency because his credentials were so horrible. And he was such an anomaly, an anomalous candidate. To me, he was conspicuously Muslim, obviously a socialist, and he had no bona fides to hold the office. Now, I work as a lawyer, and so in 2008, I sued him in the Washington State Supreme Court to have his candidacy, his before he could be inaugurated, to have him declared ineligible to hold the office. Now, I mean, it's a long story, and people who know this story, and believe me, there were many people who fought many, many battles, hard-fought battles, trying to get a United States District Court judge to agree with us that this issue was problematic, because he has never produced publicly a birth certificate which establishes his citizenship in the United States of America. Now, this is a very critical point. You have to have some originating document that declares your citizenship. For most people, it's a birth certificate. That's where your citizenship is established. If you look at your birth certificate, it will show your mother and your father and what their citizenship is. And it will be a birth certificate issued by some state or some country that tells you, with this instrument now, I am now a citizen of that particular jurisdiction. He's never produced that. Never. Well, if you can't produce that, you can't hold the office. I mean, it's a simple fundamental. You know, you have to produce that to get a driver's license, but you don't have to produce it to become the president of the United States. Well, of course, what we have since discovered is that there's been such corruption inside the United States, really since 1992, that it doesn't make any difference what you do. I mean, the corruption is so foul and the evil is so prevalent that it really doesn't matter. But he produced actually 3 different quote-unquote birth certificates. He produced 2 certificates of live birth, what are called cold, and then he produced a long-form birth certificate. All 3 were forgeries. And we know there were forgeries. I have admissions from the 2 people who forged the first 2. And then a good friend of mine in Seattle filed a 26-page affidavit with the United States Supreme Court demonstrating the 26 levels of forgery on the long-form birth certificate and pointing out who the forger was. I was actively involved in the cold case posse by Sheriff Joe Arpaio out of Maricopa County in Arizona, working with Mike Russo on the issue. And we talked extensively about what was involved in this forgery and the kind of crimes that were being committed. It's a serious crime to take a federal position with a false birth certificate. You can go to prison for 18 years for that. It's called mispersonation.
But you told me that he was born in New York, so...
He was, but under a different name.
Under a different name. Do you know the name?
Yes, his birth name is Bari Malik Shabazz. And as I wrote in the book of the Obama era in 2008, His birth father is Malcolm X. Now, Malcolm X was an American citizen, but his real name was Malcolm Little. And Malcolm Little became a convert into the Nation of Islam and became the leader of the Nation of Islam, and he became Malcolm X. But Malcolm X later changed his name to Malik Shabazz, and he had a teenage girlfriend whose name was Joanne Newman, and his teenage girlfriend gave birth to a son in 1959 named Bari Malik Shabazz. Now, this is his true identity. So the whole concept of a President Barack Hussein Obama II is a complete vacuity. It doesn't exist. That person doesn't exist. It's a complete fraudulent persona. Now, when you look at how this moves in the spiritual world, I think this is the more important thing. When you see when evil tries to control inside of this new world order, they use elements that give them a certain amount of certainty that the person involved will not convert to faith. Because remember, the conversion to faith can be done easily. A person is simply called by the Ruach HaKodesh. And they believe in their heart. They give a confession of faith, and it's over. But there's an interesting scripture in the Torah that says there are two groups of people who have no chance for salvation: illegitimate children and eunuchs. Okay? So you see the Illuminati, if you will, or you see this underclass that rule the world from the dark quarters, if you will. They like to advance the illegitimate children of people that are groomed bloodlines within their Luciferian class. That's what they like to do. So what you see continually is one illegitimate son after another. To give you an example, Adolf Schicklgruber, who became Hitler, was the illegitimate child of a Rothschild. But he was an illegitimate son. William Jefferson Clinton, an illegitimate son. And here we have, and we could even go so far as to talk about Hillary Rodham Clinton, probably an illegitimate daughter, given up on her third birthday to be raised by her grandparents. I won't tell you who her real parents are. I'm not going to disclose that here. But when you talk about Bari Malik Shabazz, he was escorted out of the country in 1965 when his father, Malcolm X, was assassinated. He was brutally assassinated. And his auntie, who was his mother's half-sister, living in Hawaii, Ann Dunham, she takes him in. Now, a lot of people say, well, he was born in Kenya. That's absolute smoke and mirrors. Even though he said himself, for 17 years I was born in Kenya, he claimed on his 3 fraudulent birth certificates that his father was Kenyan, named Barack Obama, and that he was born in Kenya. Well, that admission alone disqualifies him under Article 2, Section 1, Paragraph 5, which requires him to be a natural-born citizen. And people would say, oh, natural-born citizen, oh, come on, nobody cares about that. It's the Constitution. Yes, we care about it. If you do not qualify under the Constitution, what office are you holding?
Right. So it's illegal office.
Absolutely.
Holding it illegally right now.
Absolutely, yeah. And so here you have a fake persona, a guy under an alias, operating under one of 22 Social Security numbers, and the Social Security number he has is of a man who died in 1980, that he picked up in 1980 as a fake Social Security number. He was engaged in real estate scams most of his life. All of his buddies in Chicago ended up in prison for their real estate shenanigans, but not Barack Hussein Obama. And so the only legal name that we know that and then he, of course, had himself declared legally dead as Bari Malik Shabazz in 1994 by affidavit. No body was ever produced. Okay? But we had to tidy that up. So you have this whole litter, if you will, of false identification documents. And Mr. Trump has known the inside data on this for a long time because we've been in communication with him for many, many years. He was the one that put up $5 million and said, "Here's $5 million, Barack. Show us your real birth certificate."
Right.
And he never took the $5 million. He never took it because he couldn't do it, because he can't show his real birth certificate. So what you have is you have a guy who is a usurper, a complete fraud, I shouldn't call him a fraud. He's a total imposter. He is not who he says he is at all.
Who groomed him?
Well, he was groomed, once, if you remember, he was groomed as a Muslim.
Right.
And he was groomed as a Muslim from the get-go because they knew who he was. And they shipped him out to Hawaii to make sure he stayed alive so that the assassins who killed Malcolm X wouldn't also kill his son. Mm-hmm. And there was a fellow named Don Warden, who was one of the founders of the Black Panthers, who later changed his name to Khalid al-Mansour, again a Muslim. And Khalid al-Mansour said, "We're going to develop this guy." And so he began working with the Saudis. And in Islam, as a child, you can do whatever you want. You can be a vagrant, you can be a criminal, you can be a drug dealer, you can be anything you want to be. But when you turn 20, you have to stop doing that, and now you have to be a man. Mm-hmm. And you have to live up to these protocols. Mm-hmm. And Obama, of course, did all of that. He was basically a drug dealer at Occidental, a failing student. He got to Occidental as a foreign student. If he was a foreign student, how do you become president? Right?
It's crazy.
But he claimed, as a foreign student failing the grades at some flunky university in Southern California, that he all of a sudden transfers to Columbia and gets a degree in political science from Columbia, and he graduates the same year as Michael Barone and George Stephanopoulos. Neither one ever saw him ever. Wow. Columbia does not allow for transfer students. Only the top students in New York get into Columbia, and you matriculate from beginning to end. Mm-hmm. There's no transfer student, but he claimed that he had this degree from Columbia. Well, he got a degree because it was purchased for him by his backer, a guy named Sheikh bin Talal. Mm-hmm. Now, Sheikh bin Talal put the money behind him to get his Columbia degree. Then he began working with the CIA, working out of Pakistan. I believe that he went to Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow, where he trained as a communist agitator in the overthrow of a Western nation. That's what Patrice Lumumba was all about, the university. But he got caught there with the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there was a story written in the West German press at the time, "Poor Barack Obama can't get out of Moscow."
And I think it was either Soros or Kissinger, one of these two, that said that Barack Obama was chosen to accomplish the New World Order in America, to destroy America. Mm-hmm. Do you think he has done that? Do you think he's successful?
Well, we haven't reached the end of that.
Right.
But he's put so many elements in place. Mm-hmm. And so if you look at what happened, in 1992, there was a deal made privately. But the deal made was you had George Herbert Walker Bush, by the way, not his real name, not his birth name. Wow. He, too, was not a natural-born citizen. But that's another story.
Really? That I didn't know.
But George Herbert Walker Bush, who had a 92% approval rating in 1992, loses the election. Mm-hmm. Because a deal was made privately in the back room that said, you will step, because at the end of 92, we'd had 12 years of a Republican president. And it had gotten to the point that there were no Democrats left to fill a Democrat administration. Wow. So a deal was made privately that a Democrat should come in for 8 years. Mm-hmm. And George Bush said, I will step down now, even though I could win re-election, in order to bring a Democrat in for 8 years if my son gets the next 8 years. And the Saudi response was, that's okay if we get a Muslim for the next 8 years. So all of this was ordained in 1991. Mm-hmm. And so if you think there are free and fair elections in the United States, there has not been a free and fair election in the United States until this election, and because it was such an overwhelming vote total, and trust me, mm-hmm. it wasn't as close as the media is telling you. It was closer to 70-30. And they stuffed ballots. They're still stuffing fake ballots in the United States right now. The Democrats have every corpse that's ever laid in a grave registered to vote in the United States, and they're stuffing millions of ballots in order to remove the Trump mandate, in order so that they can create an initial, so that they can, at some level, maybe by the end of January, they'll finish faking ballots. And they can say, oh, well, look, Hillary won the popular vote. She didn't have 30% of the vote. But so you know, most Americans don't know how badly rigged American elections are. Right. So here you had this this Muslim comes into office, and in 2008 I said he's a Muslim, and people said, "Oh, you're just a whack job. You know, you're an absolute extremist." And I said, the Seattle Times called me up and said, "You said Barack Obama was a Muslim." I said, "That's correct." He said, "You realize what kind of an extremist view that is?" I said, "You realize that he gave the Shahadadan in perfect Arabic without accent to the New York Times in 2007? He says, "What's the Shahadadan?" I said, "The Muslim confession of faith." I said, "I get it. I'm an extremist because you're ignorant." And so if you go back and you read the Muslim Brotherhood protocols that were published in the 80s, the initial step was violent jihad, which of course was 9/11. Right. But that was the only step of violent jihad they wanted to wage. After that, it was economic jihad they wanted to wage. Now, bear in mind that Saudi Arabia would be a dead poor group of nomadic tribes if the United States had not pulled them away from the Ottoman Empire and elected to pay them for the oil that we otherwise could have sequestered under U.S. territory and put it in our own pockets. And these people have sat in that desert land and said, "Kill them, kill them, kill them." There's no Christian church in Saudi Arabia. There's no Jewish synagogue in Saudi Arabia. And they have put 4,200 mosques in the United States. Right. While they're directly funding ISIS, who is beheading Christians and selling 6-year-old girls into sex slavery in Iraq and Syria.
That's right. So we have a real mess in the United States, and people are being played. But I want to ask you, do you think that Trump will actually peacefully transition to the office of president? Will he be inaugurated? Or do you think that something will happen so Obama will stay in office? Do you think Obama wants to?
You ask me such a difficult question. You ask such a difficult question because my heart breaks over all of this, frankly. Yeah. And I don't want to be the one to tell the world this, but you've asked the question. And
I
so
want
I
you to speak to your feelings. You have done so much research. You have such incredible deep insight. And I want you to look at the people and tell them what you feel.
Well, first of all, I admire Donald Trump. He stepped up to the plate at a time where he was the last American who could do it, and he did it. And I admire Mike Pence and Jeff Sessions, the two key players that he has standing around him. These are great men, too. And I admire the Americans who finally got the courage to stand up after 8 years of this monstrous, unconstitutional, illegal usurpation of the presidency by this fraud, Barack Obama, when they did nothing. They did nothing. Now, they're standing up now, finally. But there are so many things that are in place. You know, the Russian news published during the last couple of weeks of the campaign that Hillary Clinton, the Clinton Foundation, had purchased $134 million worth of illegal weapons out of Albania to be shipped back to the United States. George Soros is openly funding and busing people into these areas to create violent agitation in the hopes of developing a quote-unquote purple revolution. Now, the activity that took place in Syria, this activity was a complete false overthrow. And you got to recognize, this stuff was engineered by Hillary Clinton. She is the one that caused the man in Tunisia to burn himself to death. She is the one that how did she put it in Libya? We came, we saw, he died.
Right. Yes.
When they killed Gaddafi. She put 200,000 tons of weapons in the hands of Al-Qaeda in Libya, and then arranged through Ambassador Stevens to ship those same munitions into Turkey and then into Syria, where she funded, created, deployed, and armed ISIS. And that was further developed by Senator John McCain, and you can look his picture up at the leadership of ISIS on Google right now. It's not difficult to do. Put John McCain in ISIS leadership, and the picture will come up with him with al-Baghdadi in Syria, smiling.
Right.
And they were the ones that gassed the civilians. So you have this placed and running all over Europe because of the intervention of Hillary Rodham Clinton in Northern Africa and in the Middle East. And ISIS to this day remains a critical problem. So you have Donald Trump saying, I am going to join with Russia for purposes of destroying this group ISIS. So they are doing everything they possibly can to get all of those ISIS mercenaries out of that region and into the United States. So what you have seen in how they dissected Syria and how they dissected northern Iraq was they would go into key cities like Mosul, and they would kill the leadership, and then they would hold the city by force. And they would hold the city by force using civilians as shields. So you can't come in and carpet bomb the place, or you can't come in and use any other kind of mass weapon. You have to go door to door, hand to hand combat to fight it out with them. And they have state of the art weaponry, thanks to Hillary Clinton putting 200,000 tons of it in their hands. Right. And 6 million rounds of hollow point ammunition bought with American tax dollars.
Exactly.
Now all of this armament is coming to the United States. So what do I expect to see happen? I expect to see that something that no one is going to expect is you're going to see a move to violently take portions of cities.
In the United States.
In the United States, to take them and hold them as strongholds for purposes of building the quote-unquote caliphate.
Wow.
And it will probably begin in South Chicago. And once it begins in South Chicago, if they can hold it, you know, there was 3 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, it was reported that all of these firearms were being dumped in South Chicago. The federal government was dumping all these firearms in South Chicago. That's before Hillary bought the $134 million worth of ammunition. So what are they going to do with all these firearms? Now these guys who are out there protesting with bats and stuff are suddenly going to be with fully automatic AK-47s.
Wow.
And anger and rage and blah, 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 blah to go along with it, saying, Trump is not my president, Trump is not my president.
Right.
And so the next thing you know, you're going to see the impetus and the will to hold a portion of the United States, some portion of a city, as a fortified compound against all other governments.
Do you think this was all pre-planned? Because the plan of New World Order was always to create revolution in America, so they have an excuse for martial law.
Sure.
You know how they have already built all these FEMA camps, and FEMA is, you know what FEMA is, really?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So
They're concentration camps.
they're concentration camps, fully equipped and operational, waiting for somebody to be in them. So do you think this was all, this scenario is pre-played by New World Order shadow elites who have actually made a situation like this in the United States, so the revolution will happen, so they have this excuse?
Well, the revolution, I mean, I can tell you that this revolution and so forth is really kind of extraneous, but it's going to be the methodology by which Obama remains in office.
So you think that he will remain in office?
I think there's going to be some series of extremely violent events that are beyond the violence imagined by the American public ever before seen in the United States. I think they're going to go, what? I think the U.S. public is going to go, what? What's going on? Yeah, RPGs are being used, fully automatic weapons, 50 calibers on the backs of trucks are being deployed. That's what you're going to see. And they're going to go, what is this? Will Trump survive? I pray now to Yah that Trump survives, that his administration survives, that they are able to actually do this transition of power. You can rest assured that Mr. Obama has no intention whatsoever of allowing Mr. Trump to take the office on January 21st. Now, this prophecy that Stephen was talking about with this apocalypse of Thomas, talking about bankrupting the world economy, Mr. Obama has bankrupted the world economy. He's bankrupted the entire world economy. You're talking $2 quadrillion of derivative debt.
Right.
He has all of Europe. The only thing that's keeping Europe from a complete catastrophic collapse right now is that China has underpinned Deutsche Bank for the time being. That's the only thing that's keeping it going at all. The United States economy, no, they don't want to talk about how ridiculously bankrupt the country is. It's completely 100% bankrupted. But, you know, we've gone off the cliff, and we're doing this. Just haven't gone down yet.
Wow. Okay, so all this information is quite depressing for American people. What's your suggestion what they should do right now?
Yeah, so you asked me. I didn't want to deliver this news. I would like to say the Trump administration is going to be a smooth transition and we're going to heal as a nation. Prophecy doesn't agree with that at all. Prophecy doesn't agree with that.
Right, that's what I was kind of thinking.
And
you know,
and so you have a whole. There are a number of objectives that are coming, but where Mr. Obama is concerned, what I would say to people is this: I know what I'm going to do with my family. Which is I'm going to spend time with my family, and I'm going to covet the time with my family. I'm going to consider what I can do to bless my children more, to bless my wife more, and I'm going to consider foremost, above all things, what I can do to bless Yah in my life. So for me, it is about perfecting my walk in front of the Creator. Though He may yet slay me, still I will praise His name. And so it really isn't about whether or not I'm dead or not, or whether or not I've been rounded up or killed or I've been nuked or anything else. That doesn't matter. What does matter is, am I in the way, the truth, and the life?
Are you in Him, in Creator, in Yeshua?
Yeah, right? Nothing else really matters. Nothing else matters. What else matters? Nothing else matters. And so I am, on the other hand, am on a spiritual high, if you will, because I know that the hand of Yah is with me. And I know that every day that goes by, I discover more and more of His Word. I discover more and more of His intent. I discover more and more of His blessing. And my life is corrected every day just a little bit more.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Yes, exactly. I have one last question. You know, I used to live under Soviet rule, and I don't have much trust in politicians, no matter who it is. I always leery and I always doubt. So even Mr. Trump, as much as I respect him, and I'm so happy that this World War III imminence that was here in the air, we could smell it, that's kind of gone, because the day he was elected, we went to bed with peace. After a long time, waiting for, okay, when is it going to happen? Because we were this close to the World War III.
Oh, absolutely.
With Hillary Clinton. Yes, so I'm watching Mr. Trump. I'm watching every of his moves. Of course, I'm watching Obama, what they're doing still with Clinton and this foreign policy there in Middle East. But what do you think of Mr. Trump currently meeting with Kissinger? You know, Kissinger is New World Order architect. What do you think of his being surrounded with evangelicals that have joined with Rome? You know, when I see this side of Mr. Trump, I'm kind of worried, you know, because I told you I was on the Soviet bloc. For me to say, "Ooh, this is the savior," that's very difficult for me. I am very questioning everything. So what do you think? He just recently met in his Trump Towers with Kissinger. And they were discussing China and Iran and foreign policy. And he also, I know he met with Kissinger, but I also know that he's got some really good people now around him, but he also is surrounded with evangelical leaders, such as Kenneth Copeland. And, you know, Kenneth Copeland's wife was actually working directly with him during his campaign. And these people have literally joined back with Pope of Rome, who is a New World Order agenda and a socialist and as evil as it gets. So what do you think of that side of Mr. Trump? I mean...
Well, if I was Mr. Trump, I think I would do a similar thing. I think his meeting with Mr. Kissinger was to find out, is there some gap that I don't know about here? In other words, I'm going to launch in this policy with China. You were the one that opened the door to China. What don't I know historically? What back doors, what escape hatches have they created in the initial agreements that I need to know about? Okay. So I think that's where that agreement went. Trump has a desire to be a president for all of America, even evangelicals. His biggest problem is going to be the Fourth Reich Nazis, the neocons that are in the Republican Party that are currently in Congress. That's going to be his single largest problem, assuming he gets to take office. Right. Assuming he gets to take office. And again, you have a CIA that is directed by a Muslim Brotherhood member. You have Homeland Security that is directed by a Muslim Brotherhood member. Currently, right now. There were 7 Muslim Brotherhood members inside Obama's cabinet. They control the key positions of actual force inside the country. Remember, Homeland Security controls the FEMA camps. Yes. Okay? And so you have a protocol that has not yet been executed. Now the question is, the larger question is, and this is really the larger question, the ordinance of Yah. What is the ordinance of Yah? What has he ordained? This is the question. What has he ordained?
Well, you even told me, and we discussed this, that there is this element of surprise in the Bible. They say peace and security and sudden destruction comes.
That's correct.
So are you afraid that this might be the situation, everything is peace, 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 and something will happen?
Well, they've been saying peace and security. John Kerry's been saying peace and security for a year and a half now. And there is no peace and security. It's an absolute fraud. It's a waste of time. While they are doing everything they possibly can to create World War III, and just because Trump was elected, there's an assumption that Obama would bow out gracefully like every other president has. They underestimate the evil of this man.
And you think he's the Antichrist?
He is as evil can be. Right. Now, when I didn't say he's the Antichrist. Okay. Because I don't believe that there is a singular Antichrist. Okay. I believe there is a man of lawlessness that appears at the end of days, and that this man of lawlessness is a son of sin and a man of perdition. Okay. The son of sin is not a man who harbors sin. He is a man who promotes sin. Well, Mr. Obama has run around the world promoting his LGBTQ. He has funded late-term abortions in countries that said, we don't want your abortions. He has required the destruction of national borders in order to force immigration into nations that do not want the immigration. He has allowed for rape and murder and mass murder and genocide and the destruction of civilians. He has mandated tainted vaccines be given to children, and on and on. So he comes together with a vile and evil agenda. He is the son of sin. And he, during his administration, defiled the sanctuary that is marriage. You see, same-sex marriage is not about same-sex people getting married. You know what percentage of the population got married under the same-sex marriage law? 0.0015%. Yes. Is how many people got married. And of those, the rate of suicide among them is 20 times higher than the others in that same community.
Right. So how could that be put in a law?
Because it wasn't about them getting married. It was about them defiling the temple. He defiled the temple in the same way that Antiochus Epiphanes put up the statue of Jupiter and slaughtered a pig on the altar in the Holy of Holies. The exact same defilement. Okay. And he is the man of perdition. He has betrayed everyone. He has betrayed everyone. And he began with the betrayal of his own nation. But he has betrayed everyone. He's betrayed all of his backers. He kicked everybody under the bus. Right. He doesn't have any problem with that. So you have this son of sin and this man of perdition. But more importantly, he also qualifies as the Muslim Mahdi. The Muslim Mahdi has to have specific criteria to be the Mahdi. He has to have the name of the sons of Fatima. He has to carry that name. He has to appear on a white horse. He has to be wealthy. He has to be internationally powerful. He has to embark on a mission to convert the whole world to Islam. He has to meet all of these criteria.
Okay.
Well, okay. So what were the two sons of Fatima? Hassan and Hussein. He carries the name Hussein. He has to be on a white horse. What is his name? Barak. What was the white horse that carried Muhammad to heaven? The white horse decked with the jewels of Ezekiel 28. What was the name of that horse? Al-Barak. He is the white horse of Muhammad. He has the son of the heirs of Muhammad. He qualifies as the Mahdi. If he qualifies as the Mahdi, he is the Mahdi. He is leading the whole world to Islam. He declared the United States to be an Islamic nation. By declaring the United States to be an Islamic nation, while he was the leader of the Islamic nation, it becomes Dar es Salaam. Now every Muslim in the world has a jihadic responsibility to kill the infidel inside that nation until it is restored to the Dar es Salaam. Okay, this is Muslim thinking. And this is where the Pope has made his mistake. You see, the Pope says, oh, well, we can unleash Islam and then we will control it later. Later we will bring them under the catechism. But the Pope has allowed imams to pray in the Vatican. That means the Vatican is a mosque.
Right.
The Pope himself has prayed on his knees with his shoes off in the Red Mosque in Istanbul. That means he is Muslim. Now, maybe not in Catholicism, but in Islam, he's Muslim.
Well, didn't this prophecy, Mahdi, Islamic prophecy, that wasn't divinely inspired? That's written by who?
Well, it's written by of course, it's written by Catholic monks.
So they are fulfilling their own prophecy.
They're fulfilling their own, certainly, no question.
Yeah.
But when you look at the prophecy that is inspired, whether you're looking at Daniel 11:31, the vile horn that rises up, that has no use for women, that honors a god of fortresses, and so on and so forth. You find, again, criteria, all of which Obama meets. More importantly, he also meets the criteria that is found in Revelation 13 as the beast that rises out of the earth. So who is the Pope in all of this? In Islamic eschatology, there is the name of Jesus appears, only it's Isa. And the Islamic eschatology says that Isa will appear in the end days, but he will be born, be a human being that is born, and who will ultimately die. But before he dies, he says he reveals himself as Isa, and he tells the whole world that Christianity is a myth, and demands that the whole world convert to Islam. Okay. Now, let me say this: the Pope is moving in this direction. What has he said to Europe? He's told Europe, look, embrace the immigration, because you are dying off, because you will not procreate. You are dying off. And these people will come in and breed with you and refill Europe with a population.
And you cannot say different anymore. When you are in Sweden, now in France, and we visited France and Sweden, I thought I was in Islamic Republic. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, you see,
took over.
Yeah, you see what, it was predicted that it was happening, and it was manipulated to happen, and it did happen.
Right, it was all
and so now that it's happened, but you remember that Pope Francis knows the third prophecy of Fatima. The third prophecy of Fatima says that the Pope will witness all of the cardinals killed before he himself is killed and the church is destroyed in Rome. He knows this prophecy, and yet he continues to promote Islam. So he is Isa in Islamic eschatology. How do we know he's Isa in Islamic eschatology? Because he declares himself vicarious filio Dei.
Right, yes.
Right?
Vicar of Christ, which is instead of Christ.
Instead of the Son of God on earth.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what you see is, so you have this Mahdi and you have this Isa. Okay? Now, all we're missing is the Dajjal. But when you see Obama writing as the Mahdi and fulfilling the prophecies of the man of lawlessness, fulfilling the prophecy of the beast that rises out of the earth, fulfilling the prophecies of Daniel 11:31 and down, you begin to see now that he is this person. When you say he is the son of lawlessness, the man of lawlessness, no lawful birth, no lawful name, no lawful birth certificate, no lawful father, no lawful mother, no lawful degree from Columbia, no lawful degree from Harvard, no lawful job, no lawful right to the presidency. I mean, there is nothing about him that is lawful. Nothing. So if you want a picture perfect epitome of lawlessness, if you look up lawlessness in the dictionary, you'll find his picture.
Yes. Okay, well, that was very interesting. Thank you very much. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I think that Mr. Steve gave us interesting insight into who Obama really is. Thank you for watching.